Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Welcome to the deep dive. This week we're really grappling with something quite profound, aren't we? It's this sort of paradox defining our times.
Yeah, absolutely. On one hand, you've got this deep, almost bone-deep global instability. It fuels so much anxiety.
Right, conflicts that look like they'll take decades, literally decades, to rebuild from.
But then, almost in the same breath, we're seeing these incredible leaps, explosive innovation in science, in technology, things that are genuinely reshaping, well, the next 100 years.
That tension, that's exactly what jumped out from our sources this week.
Oh, this stack is immense. It really reflects a world moving at, two completely different speeds, doesn't it? We've got dense reports covering geopolitical flashpoints, some pretty sharp warnings about economic bubbles, consumer strain.
And then the flip side, these truly visionary breakthroughs. Space travel, medical tech, it's quite the mix.
It is.
So our mission today, as always, is to try and cut through that noise. We want to give you the critical context, help you understand how these seemingly separate events are actually quite interconnected.
Yeah, we're not just listing headlines. We're trying to track the fundamental forces at play here. We'll unpack the fragility around the Gaza ceasefire, look at this more aggressive U.S. military posture down in the Caribbean.
And dive into how, well, frankly, speculative behavior seems to be driving global markets right now. Big warnings there.
But we'll also pivot from all that, let's call it chaos, to explore how innovation is bubbling up almost separately. Things like Starship's reusability goals, those AI-powered health breakthroughs, they seem to be creating a future almost detached from the day-to-day political volatility.
Okay, so let's start right there, in the thick of it. The intense political heat in what we're calling the global political cauldron, right? First stop, the Middle East. The situation in Gaza remains incredibly tense. That fragile ceasefire and the hostage diplomacy. It's just dominating everything.
It really is. And the situation is defined by these small but intensely charged movements. Recently, we saw Hamas return the bodies of 4 more deceased Israeli hostages.
And that followed an earlier return that got a lot of international attention, didn't it?
That's right. The return of Maxim Karkin's body. His mother, Natalia, actually publicly thanked Russian President Vladimir Putin and Russian diplomats. She credited them directly for their efforts in securing her son's release. She even said she wanted to meet Putin personally.
Which, that just underscores immediately how globalized this conflict has become. You've got players like Russia acting as mediators, maybe non-traditional ones in this specific context.
Exactly. But the humanitarian side, that's where the major roadblocks are right now, specifically around aid getting in.
Talk about that fragility. Israel's coordinating body, COGAT, has apparently restricted aid flow.
Yes, COGAT, that's the coordination of government activities in the territories. They've significantly tightened the flow of humanitarian aid. And they stated publicly this is a direct response to what they see as Hamas' inadequate compliance with the agreement, specifically regarding the return of all deceased hostages.
So what does that restriction actually look like on the ground? What's the scale of the reduction?
It's a really drastic cut. COGAT is now permitting only about 300 aid trucks a day into Gaza.
300? Down from what?
Down from 600, which had been the previously agreed upon number. So essentially halved.
Wow.
And on top of that, the delivery of essentials like fuel and gas has been severely limited. It's strictly reserved now for immediate humanitarian needs, think hospitals, bakeries.
But aid agencies need fuel for everything, right? Distribution, refrigeration.
Precisely. When you rely on consistent fuel deliveries just to, distribute clean water or keep refrigerators running for medicines, having that capacity, it translates almost immediately into widespread suffering. It really risks the collapse of their logistics.
And looking beyond the immediate crisis, the sheer scale of destruction, the rebuilding effort is going to be astronomical. What are the numbers looking like?
Well, the phrase used by United Nations development experts is quite chilling, actually. They assess the situation as being worse than starting from scratch.
Worse than starting from scratch.
Yeah. Their projection is that reconstructing Gaza will need a minimum of $70 billion.
$70 billion. Over what time frame?
Just 2 years. That's the initial estimate. $70 billion over 2 years.
And what does that even cover?
You're talking rebuilding housing for hundreds of thousands of people, restoring basic water and sewage infrastructure, completely reconstructing the power grid. It's a figure that just illustrates total societal breakdown, really.
And the situation internally in Gaza isn't straightforward either, is it? It's not just Israel versus Hamas. There are reports of internal power struggles.
Yes, that's where the complexity deepens, especially after Israeli forces made tactical withdrawals from certain areas. We've seen reports this week detailing masked Hamas fighters carrying out executions, men executed in Gaza City.
Executions.
Yes, it appears to be a violent, quite targeted crackdown on rival factions within Gaza. It really demonstrates Hamas trying ruthlessly to maintain or maybe even consolidate their internal control, silencing any dissent as the external military pressure shifts around.
And meanwhile, you have the U.S. weighing in. What's the stance coming from President Trump?
Well, President Trump has been very explicit. He publicly urged Hamas to return all the bodies, and then he issued a very stark demand, almost non-negotiable, it sounded like, for Hamas to disarm.
Disarm. And did he elaborate on how?
Well, his warning was direct. He said, "We will disarm them." But, and this is important, the source material notes that while the demand was absolutely clear, there were no specific details given on how the U.S. or its allies actually plan to execute that disarmament.
Yeah.
Especially given, Hamas's complex underground network and their internal power structure. It's a big demand without a clear how.
Okay, let's shift focus geographically now, moving over to the Caribbean. The U.S. military seems to be increasing its presence there, framing it as part of the fight against narco-terrorism.
That's right. And this involved a highly scrutinized action just this week. A U.S. military strike off the coast of Venezuela. It resulted in 6 deaths.
6 deaths. And the U.S. justification.
President Trump immediately classified the deceased as narco-terrorists. He stated they were involved in major trafficking operations and framed the strike as a necessary measure for U.S. regional security.
But strikes like that, especially near another country's coast, they always raise questions, don't they? Legality, necessity. Was there international pushback?
Oh, yes. Immediately. The U.S. faced strong scrutiny at the United Nations Security Council. Questions were raised about the legal basis for conducting strikes like this, potentially in international or contested waters, against non-state actors.
And human rights groups.
Amnesty International issued a strong condemnation. They labeled the strikes as unlawful. So this is clearly about more than just drug interdiction. It touches on really profound questions about sovereignty, territorial integrity, and this, well, increasingly militarized approach to the region.
And it sounds like this isn't just a one-off incident, it's part of a broader strategy.
It appears so. The U.S. Southern Command, that's SOUTHCOM, has recently formed a new joint task force. Its explicit mission is to enhance counter-narcotics efforts.
So what does that mean practically?
More ships, more planes, increased maritime patrols, increased aerial surveillance. It signals a longer-term strategy that definitely involves, the militarization of Caribbean waters.
And this heightened U.S. posture, it must be creating ripples, diplomatic friction, especially with smaller nations in the region. Grenada seems to be caught in the middle.
That's a really good example. Grenada is facing a real dilemma. The U.S. has requested permission to install radar equipment at the Maurice Bishop International Airport there.
Okay, radar for what? Surveillance, presumably?
Presumably for surveillance, yes. But local officials are deeply conflicted. On one hand, security cooperation is, generally seen as desirable. But many critics locally fear this installation risks compromising their national sovereignty.
And is there a specific fear about who might be surveilled?
Yes. Crucially, there's a widely held concern among local groups that this new military infrastructure could effectively turn Grenada into a staging ground for direct military action, or at least more aggressive surveillance against neighboring Venezuela.
So it pulls Grenada into a potential conflict they want no part of.
Exactly. It forces them to weigh potential economic benefits or security ties against these profound concerns about regional neutrality and getting dragged into something bigger. It's a tough spot.
Okay, let's cross the Atlantic now to Eurasia. The conflict in Ukraine continues, and it seems the focus is shifting towards a grim winter outlook.
Yes, unfortunately. The focus is very much on winter survival now. Kyiv's mayor, Vitaly Klitschko, issued a pretty stark warning to residents in the capital. He urged them to prepare for an exceptionally difficult winter.
Difficult meaning blackouts.
Widespread blackouts, yes. That's the very real anticipation. Russian forces have been systematically targeting Ukraine's energy infrastructure with strikes, and the fear is this will intensify as winter sets in.
And the talk around military aid, that seems to be escalating too, especially concerning more advanced weapons.
Definitely. The conversation is moving towards long-range offensive capabilities now. There are reports that the U.S. and Ukraine are in talks about potentially providing long-range Tomahawk missiles.
Tomahawks. That's a significant step up, isn't it?
It's huge.
Mm-hmm.
Not just a tactical boost, it's a strategic one. And Russia's response was, as you'd expect, immediate and sharp.
What did they say?
Their foreign ministry spokeswoman, Maria Zakharova, warned that Ukraine plans to use these Tomahawks for, quote, terrorist attacks deep inside Russian territory. That language dramatically escalates the perception of threat and, the potential for Russian retaliation.
So, with tensions rising like this, how is NATO responding? Are they adjusting their defense posture?
Yes, NATO is clearly prioritizing air defense. They've seen a number of recent incursions, Russian aircraft, drones, into Allied airspace. So the plan is to significantly bolster air defense systems, particularly across Eastern Europe.
And individual NATO members are taking action, too. I saw something about the UK and Moldova.
That's right. The UK announced it's sending counter-drone warfare instructors to Moldova. Now, this is framed as defensive assistance, helping Moldova protect itself. But critics immediately pointed out that this kind of action risks undermining Moldova's constitutional neutrality. Moldova isn't in NATO. And providing this kind of military training increases the probability, however slightly, of it being drawn into wider regional hostilities. It's a delicate balance.
Okay, shifting gears slightly, maybe a more positive note, some progress in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the DRC.
Yes, there's a flicker of hope there, though the situation remains incredibly fragile. The M23 militia, they're known to be backed by neighboring Rwanda, has agreed to a monitoring mechanism for the ceasefire that's supposed to be in place.
And why is that significant?
Well, it's crucial because the conflict in the eastern DRC has been absolutely catastrophic. It's displaced an estimated 7 million people.
7 million?
It's a staggering humanitarian crisis. So this new monitoring mechanism, which will be overseen by the African Union, the hope is it provides greater accountability, a way to investigate and, ideally, prevent future ceasefire violations. It's a step.
Okay, now let's look at political systems themselves. We saw a very sudden, very dramatic power shift in Madagascar this week.
Yes, that was a textbook military coup, really.
Yeah.
The military, led by Colonel Michael Randrianarina, seized power. President Rajoelina was reportedly moved to a safe place, essentially under military control.
And the immediate concern is democratic stability, obviously.
Obviously.
Yeah.
The installation of military rule raises very serious long-term concerns. But there's also a specific warning being sounded about the societal impact.
Which is?
Experts are warning about the marginalization of the younger generation, specifically Gen Z. The fear is that this military dominance risks profoundly excluding young people from participating in politics, from shaping the political process.
So it's not just about losing the right to vote in the short term.
No, it's deeper than that.
Yeah.
It's about potentially stifling grassroots political organizing, advocacy, silencing a whole generation, and damaging the country's democratic future long term.
And finally, in this section, the ongoing political struggle in Cuba. Another prominent opposition figure has gone into exile.
Yes, this is the story of José Daniel Ferrer Garcia. He's a very prominent Cuban opposition leader, the founder of UNPCU, the Union Patriotica de Cuba.
And he has a history of facing repression.
A long history. Years defined by targeted imprisonment, documented beatings, torture, really, at the hands of the Cuban government. He recently chose exile, relocating to Florida.
Did he frame it as giving up?
Quite the opposite. He was very clear. He framed it not as a retreat, but as a strategic shift. He vowed to continue his decades-long fight for freedom and democracy just from abroad now. Shifting the battleground, as he put it, but not his commitment.
Okay, let's move from the geopolitical stage now over to the world of economic volatility. And it seems the U.S. economy is generating its own turbulence, largely thanks to political gridlock. We have a federal shutdown underway.
That's right. The shutdown started October 1st, 2025, and it's already having concrete, immediate effects. We're looking at approximately 4,000 federal job losses already.
4,000. Where are those cuts hitting hardest?
They seem concentrated in departments crucial for, well, economic oversight and public health, notably the Treasury Department and the Department of Health and Human Services, HHS.
And beyond the direct job losses, this kind of political instability, it creates blind spots for everyone, right? For policymakers, for markets.
Exactly. That's a huge problem. The shutdown immediately delayed the release of the September jobs report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the BLS.
And that's a critical report.
Absolutely vital. It contains the key unemployment figures, job creation data, basically the numbers policymakers rely on to gauge the health of the economy. When that data isn't available, it creates significant uncertainty. The Federal Reserve, financial institutions, they're forced to operate with limited, older information. It's like flying partially blind.
So while you have dysfunction in Washington, how are regular households coping? Are there signs of financial pressure building?
Oh, definitely. The consumer data is, frankly, quite concerning. Look at car loans. Delinquency rates, the number of people falling behind on payments, have surged. They've actually surpassed the levels we saw before the pandemic.
Surpass pre-pandemic levels. That's a red flag.
It is, especially among lower-income households. It reflects a heavy reliance on credit and a real struggle to keep up with basic costs like transportation. And this strain is echoed in consumer sentiment surveys. The University of Michigan Index, for example, consistently shows a deeply negative, pessimistic outlook among consumers.
And that pessimism translates into
Cautious spending, people pull back, they hesitate on big purchases, and that, in turn, slows down overall economic growth.
So you have this picture, Main Street, struggling to pay for cars, feeling pessimistic. Yet the stock market, it seems to be on a tear. This leads to those bubble warnings we mentioned.
Yeah, this is the core paradox right now. And the warnings are piling up. We're hearing it from the big institutions, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, the Bank of England, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley. They're all sounding the alarm about a potential stock market bubble.
A bubble. What are they saying is driving it? What's fueling this speculative fervor?
Well, analysts are drawing some uncomfortable parallels, explicit parallels, to the dot-com bubble back in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Okay, so what are the ingredients this time?
They point to excessive market liquidity, basically. Lots of money sloshing around, partly from years of low interest rates. Combine that with this really aggressive optimism surrounding technology, particularly artificial intelligence, AI.
The AI hype train.
Exactly. You see soaring valuations for tech companies. Price-to-earnings ratios, the PE ratios in certain sectors are just sky high. Analysts argue these reflect hope and speculation more than current underlying profitability. It suggests the bubble, if it is one, is fundamentally detached from the economic reality of consumer strain we just talked about.
Okay, let's zoom out globally. Where is the economic bright spot? India seems to be getting a lot of positive attention.
It really is. Kristalina Georgieva, the managing director of the IMF, recently called India a key growth engine for the entire global economy. That's a pretty strong statement.
And what are the growth projections looking like?
Impressive. The IMF is forecasting India's GDP growth at 6.5% for both 2025 and 2026.
6.5%.
Yeah. And what makes that particularly significant is that India seems to be accelerating its growth, just as other major established economies, including China, are experiencing slowdowns. It's a potential shift in the global economic balance.
And this climate of uncertainty, the geopolitical risks we discussed earlier, that's also driving investors towards traditional safe havens. Gold, for instance.
Gold is having a moment, a huge moment. It has surpassed the significant milestone of $4,000 per ounce.
$4,000 an ounce, is that a record?
It marks the largest rally in the history of the precious metal. Yes.
Wow. And what's behind that surge?
It's directly attributed to those inflation fears we mentioned. Investors looking for a stable store of value when currencies feel less certain. And of course, the rising geopolitical uncertainty we talked about in the first section. People flee to safety.
And it's not just individual investors, is it? Central banks are involved.
That's a fascinating part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Central banks globally have become major buyers of gold. That suggests that sovereign nations themselves are collectively signaling maybe reduced trust in traditional sovereign bonds or fiat currencies. They're opting for physical assets instead. It's quite a statement.
Okay, meanwhile, across the pond in the UK, they seem to have a confusing economic picture. High growth, but also high inflation. How does that work?
Yeah, it's a real tightrope walk for the UK economy right now.
Yeah.
On one hand, they're forecasted to be the second fastest growing economy in the G7 group of nations this year and next. That signals a pretty robust recovery in some ways. But simultaneously, they're projected to endure the highest inflation rate among the G7 countries.
So growth is happening, but prices are rising faster than anywhere else in that group. Why?
It seems to be structural. You have strong job creation, some consumer demand driving that growth, but persistent challenges like tight labor markets, pushing up wages, high energy costs, maybe some lingering structural effects from Brexit are keeping inflation stubbornly high. The Bank of England is struggling to stabilize prices, and that severely impacts people's purchasing power.
So how is the government, the chancellor, trying to manage this, especially with a budget coming up?
Well, the chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is under immense pressure. The expectation, according to sources, is that she'll likely have to consider additional measures, potentially unpopular ones, to try and stabilize the nation's finances.
Meaning tax rises, spending cuts?
Sources indicate she's actively looking at both potential tax rises and significant public spending cuts. It's about trying to curb inflation and manage the national debt amidst these really competing pressures of growth and high prices. Not an easy task.
And sticking with international economics, trade tensions seem to be flaring up again, specifically between the U.S. and China.
Yes, President Trump has dramatically escalated trade rhetoric recently. He threatened to terminate all U.S. cooking oil trade with China.
All cooking oil trade, that sounds extreme. What prompted that?
He justified it by labeling China's refusal to buy certain U.S. agricultural products, specifically soybeans in this case, as an economically hostile act.
So using agricultural trade as leverage again.
Exactly. It signals a return to that kind of aggressive trade posturing, using exports, particularly farm goods, as a tool in geopolitical negotiations.
Okay, let's shift from macroeconomics to what's happening within businesses and labor. There was a major strike in the U.S. healthcare sector.
Yes, a significant labor action. Around 31,000 registered nurses and healthcare workers went on a 5-day strike against Kaiser Permanente.
31,000 workers. Where did this happen?
It spanned facilities across California, Hawaii, and Oregon. It was a massive mobilization.
And what were their core demands?
It really highlights severe underlying issues in healthcare right now. Their demands centered on improved wages, yes, but critically, also on better staffing conditions. It reflects the burnout, the immense strain that frontline healthcare professionals have been under, especially since the pandemic. They're saying they need more staff to provide safe care.
Now, at the other end of the financial spectrum, private equity seems to be thriving, despite wider economic uncertainties.
It does seem somewhat insulated. 2023 was actually a banner year for private equity deal-making globally. Firms raised an astonishing $556 billion.
$556 billion, wow.
Yeah, sustaining really high levels of investment activity even with headwinds in the public markets. And the size of the deals is growing too. Look at the massive $55 billion agreement for the video game company Electronic Arts, EA.
$55 billion for EA. So what does this surge tell us?
It indicates that private equity funds still have a lot of capital to deploy, and they're increasingly targeting large-scale opportunities. Things like corporate restructurings, big acquisitions, especially in sectors like technology and specialized healthcare. Often they can use leverage, debt financing, in ways that public companies can't right now.
And finally, in the business world, the fast fashion industry is under the microscope again. Shein opened a physical store.
That's right. Shein, the online fast fashion giant, opened its first permanent brick-and-mortar store. And it immediately drew intense criticism from multiple angles.
Such as?
Well, environmental advocates were quick to condemn it, highlighting the company's massive contribution to global textile waste, a huge ecological problem associated with the fast fashion model.
And labor rights groups.
They also renewed their focus on the company, citing ongoing concerns about working conditions, alleged exploitation within Shein's vast and often opaque global supply chain. The physical store basically acted as a lightning rod, bringing all these underlying ethical and environmental debates right back to the forefront.
All right, after wading through all that instability and risk, let's pivot. This section feels like a necessary breath of fresh air progress. Innovation, starting with space and SpaceX's huge ambitions for Starship.
Yeah, this is genuinely a moment of acceleration in space exploration history. SpaceX just successfully conducted the 11th test flight of its Starship mega rocket.
11th test flight. Are these getting routine yet?
Well, routine might be strong for launching the biggest rocket ever built. Test flights often have, minor issues or things they learn from. But each successful iteration like this significantly advances their core goals.
Which are? Remind us.
Achieving unprecedented payload capacity, lifting huge amounts to orbit. Making the entire system rapidly reusable, which is key to lowering costs. And ultimately, laying the groundwork for crewed missions to the Moon and then Mars. It's really the foundation for potentially becoming an interplanetary species.
And they're not just building the rocket, are they? They seem to be building an entire ecosystem down there at Starbase in Texas.
That's a really crucial point, often overlooked. The source material noted they've established their own dedicated volunteer fire department at Starbase.
A fire department. Why is that significant?
It reflects this commitment to creating a self-sustaining infrastructure.
Yeah.
Look, launching massive rockets is inherently high risk. Minimizing reliance on external emergency services means faster response times and greater operational autonomy. That's vital if you want to maintain the kind of aggressive launch schedule needed for their Mars colonization vision.
And it's not just civilian ambitions. The military is Clearly leveraging SpaceX's capabilities, too.
Absolutely. SpaceX has a key national security mission coming up. They're scheduled to launch 21 advanced communication satellites for the U.S. Military Space Development Agency, or SDA.
SDA, what's the goal of that specific launch?
It's part of what the SDA calls its Tranche 1 Transport Layer Initiative. The aim is to build a more resilient, low-latency, interconnected military satellite constellation. Think global communication, tracking, a next-generation network in low Earth orbit.
Okay, shifting from engineering to discovery. Astronomers have found a new class of giant planets that are apparently challenging our understanding of how planets form.
Yes, this is fascinating. They're calling them eccentric warm Jupiters.
Eccentric, warm Jupiters. Break that down for us.
Okay, so normally we expect gas giants like Jupiter that migrate inwards towards their star, we call those hot Jupiters, to eventually settle into nice circular orbits. They get tidally locked by the star's gravity, circularized by friction in the early planetary disk.
Makes sense. But these new ones are different.
Very different. These eccentric warm Jupiters follow dramatically elongated or eccentric orbits, and they're often not even that close to the star, hence the warm, not hot. Their paths are stretched out, not circular.
So why would they be on such strange paths? What does that imply?
Well, their existence suggests that the standard sort of smooth inward migration model for planet formation doesn't tell the whole story. It's not universally applicable.
So what's the alternative theory?
It implies these planets likely experienced much more violent, complex gravitational interactions early in their lives. Maybe they got jostled by a distant companion star in the system, or perhaps another massive planet flung them around. Essentially, something likely slingshotted them onto these highly eccentric paths. It forces us to broaden our models of orbital mechanics. It can be a much rougher process than we thought.
Okay, bringing our focus back closer to home, back to Earth's immediate vicinity, there's a growing concern about a weak spot in our planet's magnetic field.
Yes, we're talking about the South Atlantic Anomaly, the SAA. It's this vast region, primarily over South America and the southern Atlantic Ocean, where the Earth's magnetic field is significantly weaker than elsewhere.
And it's getting weaker. Or bigger.
Satellite data confirms it's increasing in size. The area covered by the anomaly is expanding.
Okay, so the magnetic shield is thinner there. Why is that a problem?
Because that magnetic field normally protects us from high-energy radiation from space, like charged particles from the sun. Where the field is weaker, in the SAA, this radiation can penetrate much closer to the Earth's surface.
And the concern is mainly for things in orbit.
Primarily for low-altitude satellites, yes.
Yep.
Anything passing through that SAA region gets a higher dose of radiation.
What can that radiation do to a satellite?
It can cause what are called single-event upsets, basically. A memory bit flips or electronics temporarily malfunction. In worst-case scenarios, it can cause permanent damage. As the SAA expands, future satellites flying in low Earth orbit, including potentially large constellations like Starlink, will need greater radiation shielding. That increases their cost, their complexity. It's a growing operational hazard.
Okay, let's move from space down to the digital world. Artificial intelligence, AI, seems to be moving rapidly from labs into everyday consumer products.
It really is accelerating. We're seeing AI transition straight into daily life now. Take Walmart, for example. They've partnered with OpenAI.
The ChatGPT folks.
Exactly. To integrate a ChatGPT shopping feature.
Yeah.
So you can use natural language, just talk or type like, hey, I need ingredients for a low-carb birthday dinner for 4 people. And it helps build your shopping list, find the products online or in the store.
And in fitness, too.
Yeah, Tonal, the smart home gym system. They're adding AI to their new Pilates feature. The AI watches your form and suggests adjustments, helps correct you in real time. It's becoming like a virtual personal trainer.
While these consumer applications are rolling out, there are also huge infrastructure investments happening. Google's making a massive bet on India for AI.
A colossal commitment, yes. Google announced an enormous $15 billion investment. That's over the next 5 years.
$15 billion. Where exactly is that going?
It's earmarked specifically for establishing its largest artificial intelligence hub in Visakhapatnam, India.
Its largest hub globally, in India.
That's the plan. It's a really strategic move. It highlights India's growing importance, not just as that economic engine we talked about earlier, but as a central, future global location for actually developing advanced AI algorithms and the infrastructure to run them.
Okay, now here's a development that really pushes the boundaries, ethically speaking. OpenAI is changing its stance on certain types of content. Erotica.
Yes, this definitely sparked a lot of debate. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman announced that future versions of their ChatGPT chatbot will permit erotic content, but only for users who are verified as adults.
Erotica generated by AI? What's the rationale?
Altman defended it by saying it's part of an effort to make the AI function in a more human-like manner, covering a broader range of human expression. But as you can imagine, this instantly reignited really heated ethical discussions
About what specifically?
about the complexities of content moderation for AI, how to effectively ensure user consent and age verification, and fundamentally how AI platforms should handle sensitive or adult-oriented material, even if access is age-gated and supposedly opt-in only. It's a tricky line to walk.
And this whole AI boom, it's forcing even the biggest tech companies to team up, isn't it? To stay competitive.
That's a massive trend right now. You saw Meta Platforms, that's Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, form a strategic partnership with the semiconductor giant ARM.
ARM, the chip designer, why that pairing?
The stated goal is clear: accelerate AI performance across all of Meta's huge platforms. It's necessary because AI efficiency, how fast and cheaply you can run these complex algorithms, is increasingly tied to having specialized silicon custom chips.
So it's not just about the software anymore.
No, it mirrors this broader industry pivot. You need to deeply integrate advanced chip technology right into your core computing infrastructure if you want to stay ahead of rivals in terms of algorithm speed, functionality, and even energy efficiency.
And finally, in the tech space, a platform trying to rebuild trust through transparency. X, formerly Twitter.
Yes, X is rolling out some new features specifically aimed at increasing user transparency and, they hope, user trust.
What kind of features?
They'll now display more background information directly on user profiles. Things like the account creation date, the geographical location where the account was set up, and importantly, the history of any username changes.
The idea being?
The idea is to give users more context, to help them better assess the authenticity and history of the accounts they're getting information from. It's a direct attempt to combat misinformation, bots, and anonymous accounts spreading problematic content. Whether it works remains to be seen, but it's a step towards more accountability.
Okay, let's shift gears again, this time to health and scientific innovation. And this first one sounds like pure science fiction, a smart bandage.
It really does, but it's real. Researchers at the University of California, Santa Cruz have developed this wearable device called a heel.
A heel, what does it do?
It's essentially an intelligent bandage. It integrates AI, tiny bioelectronic sensors, and even advanced imaging tech, all in a flexible patch.
So what does it sense?
It monitors the wound environment in real time. It tracks things like pH level, temperature, tissue oxygenation, key indicators of how well a wound is healing.
And then it does something based on that data.
Exactly. The AI analyzes the sensor data and then triggers personalized, targeted treatments. Maybe it applies tiny electrical stimulation to encourage cell growth or releases specific medication precisely when needed.
That's incredible. Does it actually speed up healing?
Early trials are very promising. They've shown that a-heal accelerates tissue regeneration and wound healing by approximately 25% compared to traditional wound care methods.
25% faster. Who would benefit most from that?
Think about people with chronic conditions like diabetic ulcers, where wounds can take months, sometimes even years, to close properly. For them, a 25% acceleration is a massive leap forward. It could significantly reduce the risk of infection, potentially prevent amputations. It's a game changer if it scales up.
Wow. Okay, sticking with health challenges, pain management remains huge. Any breakthroughs there?
Another really significant piece of research, this time from New York University's Pain Research Center. They've identified a specific biochemical switch within our cells.
A switch that does what?
It appears to have the capability of turning off pain signals at a very fundamental level. And crucially, this switch seems to operate without engaging the neurochemical pathways that traditional painkillers, especially opioids, target.
So the implication is pain relief without the side effects, or addiction risk.
That's the tantalizing prospect, yes. This research offers the potential for a whole new generation of pain treatments that could be non-addictive and free from the serious side effects associated with opioids. Given the ongoing opioid crisis, finding alternatives like this represents a potential paradigm shift. Still early days, but very hopeful.
Okay, this next one caught my eye. It involves a common natural sweetener, stevia, and hair loss treatment. That sounds like an odd combination.
It does sound surprising, but the research is interesting. We're talking about a specific compound derived from the stevia plant called stevioside.
Stevioside, and how does it relate to hair loss?
It's been found to significantly enhance hair regrowth, but specifically when it's combined with minoxidil.
Minoxidil, that's the active ingredient in Rogaine, right? A common hair loss drug.
Exactly. But the key here isn't just mixing them, it's the delivery system. They used a microneedle patch.
Microneedles. Little tiny needles.
Yeah, a patch with microscopic needles that painlessly penetrate just the very top layer of skin. The stevia side, when delivered this way alongside the minoxidil, seems to significantly improve the skin's permeability.
Ah, so it helps the minoxidil get absorbed better.
Precisely. It allows the minoxidil drug to get absorbed much more effectively right into the scalp where it's needed.
And did it work in tests?
Well, in testing on bald patches on mice, this combination, stevia side plus minoxidil via microneedle patch, resulted in 67.5% hair coverage after just 35 days.
67% in about a month. How does it compare?
Significantly better than standard minoxidil treatments alone, even when those were delivered by microneedle patch without the stevia side. It really highlights the stevia side acting as a potent absorption enhancer in the system. Huge potential commercial application there, obviously.
Absolutely. Okay, but let's switch back to a global health threat. The World Health Organization, the WHO, is sounding the alarm about antibiotic resistance.
Yes, and the language they're using is stark. They're warning about an alarming surge in drug-resistant infections, what we commonly call superbugs.
We hear about superbugs a lot. What's the specific concern now?
The core warning is that the rate at which these superbugs are developing resistance to our existing antibiotics is now outpacing the development pipeline for new antibiotics. We're losing the race.
So we're running out of effective drugs faster than we can invent new ones.
That's the fear, and it poses a dire, immediate global health risk. It threatens to undermine modern medicine, common surgical procedures, minor infections. They could potentially become life-threatening again if we don't have effective antibiotics. The trend is really worrying.
Okay, let's wrap this section with something fundamental. A discovery that literally changes our understanding of water itself. A new phase of ice.
Yes, Ice XXY. Scientists have successfully created a brand new phase, or crystalline structure, of ice.
Ice X1, what's so special about it? We know about different ice phases already, right?
We do, but what's revolutionary here is how they made it. They formed it under truly extreme pressure, about 20,000 times the normal atmospheric pressure on Earth.
Okay, extreme pressure makes sense for new ice forms, but didn't they need extreme cold?
That's the key breakthrough. They achieved this at room temperature.
Room temperature ice created under massive pressure. How?
Using incredibly rapid compression techniques. They squeezed water molecules so fast they didn't have time to form the usual ice structures, and instead locked into this new Ice XXI configuration.
So what does creating room temperature, high pressure ice tell us?
It demonstrates the incredible plasticity, the flexibility, of water's hydrogen-bonded structure. High pressure forces the molecules into new arrangements that just don't occur naturally here on Earth's surface.
And why is studying these weird ice forms important?
It's vital for planetary science. Being able to study these high-pressure ice phases at more accessible temperatures gives us concrete insights into the likely internal structures deep within icy moons in our solar system, places like Jupiter's moon Europa or Saturn's moon Enceladus. It helps us understand their geology, potential for liquid water oceans beneath the ice, all sorts of things. It's fundamental science with big implications.
All right, let's move now from the microscopic structure of ice to the truly macroscopic scale of our planet's climate. The signals here seem very mixed, don't they? Record growth in renewables, but still not enough.
That's the core frustration, exactly. The International Renewable Energy Agency, that's IRENA, they reported that 2024 saw a record amount of new renewable energy capacity added globally, 582 gigawatts.
582 gigawatts, that sounds huge.
It is a record-breaking volume. It represents about a 15.1% annual growth rate, which is good, but
not good enough.
It falls short. The analysis shows we need about a 16.6% annual increase sustained year after year if we're going to meet the ambitious decarbonization goals that were set during the big UN climate change conference, COP28. So yes, we're running fast, installing lots of solar and wind, but the target, the required pace, is actually moving even faster. We're falling slightly behind schedule.
And meanwhile, the most basic indicator is CO2 in the atmosphere that's also hitting records, but in the wrong direction.
Yes, the UN released a very worrying report. It confirmed that 2024 saw the largest single-year increase on record for atmospheric carbon dioxide levels.
The largest increase ever recorded in 1 year? Is that just because we emitted more?
That's part of it. Of course, emissions are still tragically high. But the report also highlighted another factor, a documented decrease in the Earth's natural ability to absorb CO2.
What does that mean? The planet's natural sinks are struggling.
Exactly. Things like forests absorbing less CO2, maybe changes in ocean chemistry affecting absorption. So not only are we putting more CO2 up there, but the planet's natural systems for removing it seem to be becoming less efficient. It's like a double whammy, a really serious environmental warning.
Now, a key part of the plan to decarbonize some tricky industries is green hydrogen. How's that sector doing?
Well, green hydrogen is seen as crucial, especially for decarbonizing what they call the hard-to-abate sectors, things like steel manufacturing, long-haul aviation, shipping, where direct electrification is difficult.
Right. It's supposed to be a clean fuel alternative, but...
But the sector is facing some pretty significant real-world setbacks right now. Rising production costs are a major factor. Higher interest rates are making it more expensive to finance these big capital-intensive projects.
So money is drying up.
We're seeing funding cuts, project cancellations, delays. This is happening in major potential markets like Australia and across Europe. The technology itself holds promise, but the current economics are proving challenging for wide-scale, rapid rollout. It's a bump in the road for a technology many hoped would scale faster.
Okay, turning to environmental integrity, specifically deforestation. A major global company has been linked to illegal logging in the Amazon.
Yes, a new Human Rights Watch report focused on JBS, which is the world's largest beet company.
JBS, what did the report find?
It links the company, through its supply chain, to illegal deforestation in the Brazilian Amazon.
How does that work? Do they buy directly from illegally deforested land?
It's more sophisticated, apparently. The report documents how loopholes in the supply chain are exploited. Cattle raised on illegally cleared land are sometimes moved to legitimate intermediary ranches for a final fattening period.
Kind of like laundering the cattle.
Effectively, yes. It obscures their origin before they're sold to JBS processing facilities. This kind of loophole, according to the report, contributed to the loss of over 17,000 square kilometers of rainforest just in Brazil's Pará state in 2024 alone. It's a massive enforcement challenge.
17,000 square kilometers, that's huge. Meanwhile, in a different part of the world, Tunisia, a local environmental crisis, seems to have boiled over into violence.
Yes, in the city of Gabes in Tunisia, there have been violent clashes between police and local residents.
What are the residents demanding?
They're demanding the permanent closure of a state-owned phosphate processing facility run by a company called CGT.
Why? Pollution.
Severe pollution, apparently for years. Residents are profoundly frustrated. They talk about years of toxic emissions, unfulfilled promises from the government and the company to clean up the environment. They're describing Gabes, where the industrial complex is located, as a city of death because of the ongoing public health crisis they blame on the pollution. The protests turned violent out of sheer desperation, it seems.
That sounds awful. Okay, let's shift from environmental issues to geology. Seismic risk, earthquakes. There's new research suggesting we need to think about fault lines differently. Not just in isolation.
That's right. This research could fundamentally change how we assess earthquake risk, especially in seismically active places like California. It comes from researchers at Stanford and the U.S. Geological Survey, the USGS. They focused on a phenomenon called stress triggering.
Stress triggering, what does that mean in earthquake terms?
It's the idea that stress built up on one major fault line can be almost instantly transferred or triggered when a nearby connected fault line ruptures in an earthquake. The energy release on one fault adds stress to its neighbor.
So one earthquake could make another one more likely soon after.
Exactly. The study specifically looked at the potential for this kind of synchronization between two of California's biggest and most dangerous faults, the San Andreas and the nearby Hayward Fault.
They're connected somehow.
The thinking is they share deep stress mechanisms. So a major quake on the San Andreas could, theoretically, increase the immediate likelihood of a catastrophic quake on the Hayward Fault, or vice versa. It raises the terrifying prospect of much larger, perhaps almost simultaneous disasters than if we just consider each fault in isolation. It changes the risk calculation.
That's a sobering thought. Okay, before we get to our final cultural topics, a quick trip back in time. A major archaeological find in Egypt.
Yes, a really significant discovery in the Sinai Peninsula. Archaeologists working at a site called Tel Habwa have unearthed the remains of a colossal desert fortress.
Colossal? How old is it?
About 3,500 years old, dating back to Egypt's New Kingdom period, and it's considered one of the largest, most strategically important fortifications ever found in that entire region.
Wow. What does a find like that tell us?
Its sheer size, its location. It provides invaluable insights into ancient Egyptian military architecture, their border defense strategies, particularly how they control the crucial land routes and trade routes leading from Egypt into Asia Minor across the Sinai. It's a major piece of the puzzle of ancient geopolitics.
Fascinating. Okay, finally today, let's turn to the intersection of politics, culture, and free speech. This week saw a very high-profile posthumous award given in the United States.
That's right. On the date that would have been his 32nd birthday, the late conservative activist Charlie Kirk was posthumously awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President Trump.
The Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor.
Indeed. And President Trump also formally declared October 14th as a national day of remembrance for Kirk. As you can imagine, this high-level tribute drew immediate and very strong reactions across the entire political spectrum.
And this act of tribute then immediately spilled over into a controversy about free speech and immigration policy.
It did, almost instantly. The U.S. government announced shortly after the award ceremony that it had revoked the visas of 6 foreign nationals.
Revoked their visas? Why?
Because they have posted critical comments on social media. The government interpreted these comments as celebrating Kirk's death.
And the reaction to that?
Critics of the administration immediately jumped on it. They argued that revoking visas based on online commentary, even if those comments are offensive or in poor taste, represents a dangerous politicization of immigration policy. They see it as setting a worrying precedent about limiting the free speech rights of non-citizens, even when they're outside the U.S. It raises big questions.
And this issue about who gets allowed into a country based on their expressed opinions or past statements, it's not just a U.S. issue, is it? Australia had a similar case.
That's a really interesting parallel, yes. It shows this sentiment about pre-screening visitors based on their ideology isn't unique. In Australia, their High Court recently upheld a government decision to deny a visitor visa to Candace Owens, the far-right U.S. political commentator.
Denied her entry. What was the reasoning there?
The court ruling specifically cited concerns about her past public statements. They mentioned remarks that were seen as downplaying the Holocaust and other comments deemed Islamophobic. The court essentially agreed with the government that her presence and potential statements in Australia could incite public discord, and that went against Australia's national interest standards for public communication and social harmony. 2 different countries, similar debates about boundaries. #outro.
Wow. We have certainly covered a huge amount of ground today. I mean, from the staggering $70 billion needed just to start rebuilding Gaza.
Right, compared to, say, the $55 billion private equity deal for a video game company, Electronic Arts. The scales are just wild.
Exactly. And from the dangers of advanced weapons like Tomahawk missiles potentially going to Ukraine.
To the incredible biomedical precision of something like the A-Heal Smart Bandage, speeding up tissue repair by 25%. It's such a contrast.
When you look at all the sources we covered, all the stories, does a core theme emerge for you?
I think it synthesizes around 2 big competing forces, maybe. On one side, you definitely see this consolidation of centralized power and also centralized risk. Think military coups like in Madagascar, or aggressive U.S. geopolitical actions like those strikes off Venezuela.
Or even the macro warnings from giant financial institutions about a potential stock market bubble. Centralized players assessing system-wide risks.
Exactly. But then battling against that, or maybe just operating a completely different track, you have the rise of distributed innovation.
Right.
Like SpaceX's private space tech breakthroughs, pushing towards Mars seemingly regardless of earthly politics, or those grassroots health solutions like using stevia and a microneedle patch for hair growth, or even just the way AI is integrating into consumer products, often driven by partnerships outside the traditional seats of power.
So centralized power versus distributed innovation.
Kind of. And that tension, I think, leads us to our final provocative thought for everyone listening.
Go for it.
We noted the IMF's incredibly positive outlook on India becoming a global growth engine, right?
Yeah, just as the U.S. faces economic uncertainty.
Exactly. And we see companies like Apple continuing to pivot manufacturing, shifting infrastructure away from China towards places like Vietnam. So the question isn't just about, trade figures this quarter. It feels more fundamental.
Is this cycle right now marking the true beginning of a lasting shift? A genuinely multipolar global economic order where new centers of financial and manufacturing power really start to displace the old guard?
Or is the dominance of the established financial powers, the existing military structures, just too deeply entrenched?
Yeah.
Can distributed technology and shifting supply chains really overturn that established order easily?
So when you look at all these forces, all these staggering numbers, the billions for rebuilding, the billions for acquisitions, the growth rates, the military spending, ask yourself, what's the ultimate driver of global power dynamics going forward? Is it shifting finance or is it shifting technology?
Which force ultimately holds more sway in shaping the next few decades?
Something to definitely chew on this week. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.